The coffin was still open when my brother leaned down, adjusted our father's tie, and whispered, "You can stop crying now. Nobody's watching." I wasn't crying. But that was the first lie of the day. There would be 17 more before midnight. I stood beside the casket in a black dress that didn't fit right because I hadn't been to a formal event in 2 years. Not since my diagnosis. Not since the world decided I was too fragile to participate in it. My hands were steady at my sides. My breathing was even. My eyes were dry. Not because I didn't feel anything. Because I'd learned a long time ago that showing what you feel in rooms full of predators is the fastest way to become prey. Around me, the funeral home was packed. Lawyers, investors, politicians, people who called themselves family friends, but hadn't called once in the 2 years since my father stopped letting them through the gate. They all wore the same expression. Concerned, respectful, already calculating. My brother Marcus stood on the other side of the coffin. Perfect suit, perfect posture, perfect grief. Everything about him was polished in that way that makes people trust you without asking why. His wife Alina stood beside him, one hand on his arm, the other holding a tissue she hadn't used once. Behind them, 3 rows of chairs filled with people who mattered more to my father's legacy than I ever did, at least according to him. "You okay?" Marcus asked, turning to me with practiced softness. His hand touched my shoulder. Light, controlled, the kind of touch that says I care without meaning it. "I'm fine," I said, same tone I always use. Flat, final, done. He smiled, not warmth, approval, like I'd passed a small test by not making a scene. "Good," he said, "because there's a lot to handle after this. The will, the company, the estate, Dad left things. Complicated." Complicated. That's the word powerful people use when they've arranged everything to benefit themselves and need you to accept it without question. I didn't respond. I just looked at my father's face one more time. Still, arranged, peaceful in a way he never was in life. Whatever secrets he carried, they stayed behind those closed eyes now. But the problems he created, those were very much alive, and they were about to walk into the room. The service ended exactly 23 minutes after it started. My father would have appreciated that. He hated wasted time almost as much as he hated being wrong. People filed past the casket slowly, offering condolences that sounded rehearsed. Some hugged Marcus. Some shook his hand. A few nodded at me with that look. The one that says, "I'm sorry for your loss, but also you really should have been more like your brother." Alina stayed close to Marcus the entire time, positioning herself like a strategic asset. She was always good at that, reading rooms, understanding dynamics, knowing exactly where to stand so she appeared connected to power without looking desperate for it. My father respected that about her. He respected calculation. By the time the last guest left, the funeral director approached us quietly. "The family has requested a private reading," he said, looking at Marcus. "The lawyer is waiting in the East Wing." Marcus nodded. "Of course." He turned to me. "You coming?" I followed without answering. Not because I didn't have a choice, because I wanted to see the lie before it was fully constructed. The East Wing was smaller, quieter. Wood paneling, low light, a long table with 4 chairs. The lawyer was already there. Gerald Hoffman, 63, silver hair, expensive watch. He'd been my father's legal architect for 30 years, which meant he knew where every body was buried, sometimes literally. He stood when we entered, nodded once at Marcus, then glanced at me with an expression I couldn't fully read. Not pity, something closer to discomfort. Like he was sitting on something sharp and couldn't shift his weight. "Please sit," he said. We did, Marcus at the head. Alina beside him, me across the table. The distance felt intentional. Hoffman opened a leather folder. Thick, organized. The kind of document set that takes weeks to prepare, which meant this had been planned long before my father actually died. "Before I begin," Hoffman said, his voice measured, professional, "I need to confirm that everyone present is aware this is a binding legal proceeding." Marcus nodded. Alina folded her hands. I stayed still. "Very well." Hoffman adjusted his glasses. "This is the last will and testament of Richard Caldwell, executed 14 months ago, amended 6 months ago, and finalized 3 weeks before his passing. 14 months. That was before my diagnosis got worse, before the hospitalizations started, before my father decided I was no longer part of the future. He'd been planning this while I was still trying to be part of the family. The estate, Hoffman continued, valued at approximately $470 million, including real estate holdings, investment portfolios, and controlling interest in Caldwell Strategic Group, is bequeathed as follows. He paused. Standard legal drama. Let the silence build before the impact. To Marcus Richard Caldwell, the eldest son, the entirety of the Caldwell Strategic Group, including all subsidiaries, intellectual property rights, and operational control. Additionally, full ownership of the primary residence, the vacation properties in Aspen and the Hamptons, and 75% of liquid assets. Marcus didn't smile. He didn't need to. His posture shifted almost imperceptibly, wider, rooted, like the ground beneath him had just solidified into something permanent. Hoffman turned a page. To Alina Caldwell, as spouse of the primary beneficiary, a trust of $15 million, unrestricted access, effective immediately. Alina's eyes moved, just slightly. A flicker of satisfaction she couldn't fully hide. $15 million. Not life-changing for people at this level, but enough to confirm she was on the right side of the line. Another page turned. And to Juliet Caldwell, Hoffman said, pausing just a fraction longer than he had for Marcus. A care trust in the amount of $2 million, disbursed monthly under the supervision of a court-appointed trustee, conditional upon compliance with medical treatment requirements. The room went quiet, not the respectful kind, the tight kind. The kind that happens when everyone knows something unfair just happened, but no one is going to say it. 2 million, out of 470 million, not even 0.5%, and it came with conditions, with supervision, with someone else deciding what I deserved and when I could have it. Marcus broke the silence first. "That's generous of Dad," he said. His voice carried just enough warmth to sound genuine to anyone who wasn't paying attention. "He wanted to make sure you were taken care of, Juliet. This way you don't have to worry about anything. The trustee handles the details. You just focus on your health." Your health, the phrase people use when they want to reduce you to your diagnosis. I looked at Hoffman. He didn't look back. His eyes stayed on the document like the words on the page were more important than the person they affected. "Is there anything else?" I asked. Hoffman hesitated, just briefly. "There is one additional clause," he said slowly, "a non-contest provision." Marcus leaned forward slightly. Alina's hand tightened on the table. "If any beneficiary challenges the terms of this will," Hoffman read, "their share is immediately revoked and redistributed to the remaining beneficiaries." I let that sit for a moment, not because I was processing it, because I wanted to see if Marcus would look at me when he thought I understood the trap. He did, small smile, controlled, the kind of expression that says checkmate without saying a word. "Signifies," Hoffman said, sliding 2 copies of the acknowledgement form across the table, "that you've been informed and understand the terms." Marcus signed immediately, clean, confident, practiced. Alina signed beside him, smaller handwriting, neater, like she'd been taught to take up less space on paper than the men around her. Hoffman placed a pen in front of me. I looked at the document, clean legal language, tight, efficient, every word placed exactly where it needed to be to remove my options. I picked up the pen. Marcus watched. Alina watched. Hoffman watched. I signed. Not because I accepted it, because I understood something they didn't. The will only controlled what my father left behind. It didn't control what I'd already built, and it definitely didn't control what was coming next. I placed the pen down and stood up. No reaction, no speech, just movement. "Juliet," Marcus said, his voice carrying that familiar blend of concern and control. "We should talk about your living situation. The house in Georgetown is part of the estate now. You're welcome to stay for a transition period, but we'll need to discuss arrangements." He was already planning my removal, before the ink was dry, before the funeral flowers had wilted. I'll manage, I said. He tilted his head. You sure? I mean, given everything, it might be easier if we coordinate. Alina has some ideas about. I said I'll manage, I repeated. Same tone, no edge, no anger, just a wall. Marcus held my gaze for a second longer than comfortable. Then he nodded. Okay, if you change your mind. I walked out of the East Wing without looking back, not because I was making a statement, because there was nothing left for me in that room. The will had been read, the trap had been set, and they were already celebrating a victory they didn't understand. That was lie number 2. There would be 15 more. 2 weeks. That's how long it took for Marcus to start dismantling everything around me. First, the Georgetown house. The lawyers sent a notice on a Tuesday. Formal, polite, and absolutely ruthless. I had 30 days to vacate. The property was being prepared for sale as part of a state liquidation. Translation. Marcus didn't want me living somewhere that reminded him I existed. Then the medical coverage. My father's private health care plan, the one that covered specialists no insurance company would touch, was suddenly under review. Alina called personally to deliver the news. Her voice was soft, practiced, almost caring. We're just making sure everything is structured properly, she said. You know how complicated these things get after a passing. I didn't argue. I didn't ask questions. I just listened and hung up. Then the isolation started. Not obvious, never obvious. People who used to return my calls stopped. Invitations that used to arrive stopped arriving. My name was quietly removed from a charity board I'd sat on for 4 years. No announcement, no explanation, just erased. Marcus wasn't destroying me. He was making sure no one would notice when I disappeared. That's the sophisticated version of cruelty. Not loud, not violent. Just systematic removal until the person you're targeting becomes invisible. I moved into a small apartment in Alexandria. 1 bedroom, basic furniture. Nothing that said money or history or connection to a family name that no longer wanted me. The boxes I brought were minimal. Clothes, documents. 1 old hard drive I'd kept in a safe for 6 years. That was it. Everything else stayed in the Georgetown house because none of it mattered. Not the furniture, not the photographs, not the memories built inside walls that were never really mine. The first night in the apartment, I sat on the floor with my back against the wall and did something I hadn't done in a long time. I turned on the hard drive. It hummed quietly, old technology but reliable, the kind that doesn't connect to anything. No Wi-Fi, no cloud, no backdoor access, just stored files and encrypted partitions that only respond to one key sequence. A sequence I built myself when I was 19 years old and just starting to understand that the people closest to me were also the most dangerous. The files loaded slowly, organized, layered. 6 years of work that no one in my family had ever seen, not because I was hiding it, because they never thought to look. Let me explain something about the Caldwell family. On paper, we're impressive. 3rd-generation industrial money. A strategic consulting firm that landed government contracts, corporate restructuring deals, and international partnerships worth billions over 3 decades. My grandfather started it. My father expanded it. And Marcus, according to every public narrative, was the one who would take it to the next level. That's the story they told. That's the story everyone believed. Here's the story that actually happened. When I was 17, my father pulled me into his study and handed me a problem. Not a request. A problem. The firm had just lost a major defense contract because their data analysis was outdated. Competitors had moved to predictive modeling. Caldwell Strategic was still using methods from the previous decade. Fix it, my father said. He didn't ask if I knew how. He didn't offer resources. He just dropped a stack of files on my desk and walked out. I didn't know how, not then, but I spent 3 weeks teaching myself. Every night, every weekend. Raw data, programming languages, statistical frameworks, system architecture. I built a new analytical model from scratch, tested it, refined it, tested it again. Then I handed it back to my father with a 1-page summary he barely read. 2 months later, Caldwell Strategic won a contract worth $40 million using that model. My father never mentioned my name, not once. He presented the work as internal innovation, the firm's development, his leadership's vision. I was 18. I didn't understand what had happened yet. I just thought that's how families worked. You contribute. They take credit. You stay quiet. That's loyalty. I was wrong. Over the next 6 years, I built the invisible infrastructure of Caldwell Strategic. Every major contract they won, every predictive model that gave them an edge, every financial structure that protected their assets from liability, every risk assessment that kept them ahead of regulators. I designed it. I coded it. I tested it. I maintained it. And every single time, the credit went somewhere else, to my father's leadership, to Marcus's business acumen, to the firm's institutional excellence. I didn't correct anyone, not because I was weak, because I was building something they couldn't see. And the less they saw, the more access I had. The more access I had, the more control I gathered, quietly, consistently, without permission. By the time I was 23, I had administrative access to every system Caldwell Strategic operated on. Financial records, client files, internal communications, legal frameworks, supply chain data, everything. Not because I hacked anything, because I built the systems. And when you build the system, you don't need a key. You are the key. I also built something else, a separate infrastructure, independent of Caldwell Strategic, independent of my family, a network of encrypted servers, offshore accounts under legal structures that couldn't be traced back to the family name, and a portfolio of intellectual property that I had never registered under anyone's name but my own. This is the part people miss about control. It's not about what you take. It's about what you build that no one knows exists until the moment it matters. I sat on the floor of that apartment in Alexandria, scrolling through files that represented 6 years of invisible work, and I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not anger, just clarity, because everything I needed was right there, and everything they thought they owned was about to become very complicated. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Almost. "This is a secure line," the voice said. "Female, professional, no introduction. We need to discuss the Caldwell estate restructuring, specifically your role in the underlying architecture." I didn't respond immediately. Secure lines don't call you by accident, and they don't mention your role unless they already know what that role is. "Who is this?" I asked. "The question you should be asking," she said, "is not who I am, it's what I know." A pause, then she continued. "I know that Caldwell Strategic's predictive analytics platform, valuation models, and risk assessment frameworks were designed and maintained by a single architect over the past 6 years. I know that architect is not Marcus Caldwell. I know that architect is not Richard Caldwell. And I know that architect is currently sitting in a 1-bedroom apartment in Alexandria with a 6-year-old hard drive that contains the original source code for systems currently generating approximately $200 million in annual contract value." The room felt smaller, not because I was scared, because whoever this was had just described my exact position with surgical precision. "What do you want?" I asked. "To make you an offer," she said. "Not from me, from someone who's been watching your situation very closely, someone who understands what you built, and someone who knows that Marcus Caldwell is about to do something very stupid with systems he doesn't understand." She paused. "He's planning to sell the firm. Full acquisition. International buyer. The deal closes in 60 days. And when it does, every system you built, every piece of intellectual property you created, every framework that makes that company valuable, gets transferred to a third party who has no idea where it came from or how it works." I let that settle. "More importantly," she added, "the buyer has been flagged, not publicly, not yet. But the systems you built are being evaluated for potential dual-use applications. Military intelligence, surveillance infrastructure. If that sale goes through, your work doesn't just get sold. It gets weaponized." Dual use, the term that sounds innocent but means the opposite. Technology that can be used for civilian purposes and military purposes. Once it crosses that line, there's no going back. No recall. No control. Whoever holds it decides how it's used. And I would have built the foundation for something I never intended. "When can we meet?" I asked. "Tomorrow, 800. The address will be sent to a secure device, not this phone. You'll receive it within the hour." The line went dead. I sat there for a moment, the hard drive humming quietly beside me. 60 days. That's all the time between now and a point of no return. Marcus wasn't just selling the family business. He was selling my work to people who would use it in ways I couldn't allow. He didn't know that. Of course he didn't. He never understood what he was selling. He only understood the price. That's the difference between people who inherit power and people who build it. The inheritors see the sticker. The builders see the engine. And right now, someone was about to buy a car they didn't know I built, and I was the only one who knew how to take it back. The address led me to a building in Arlington that had no name on the outside. No signage. No directory. Just a glass facade reflecting the street like it didn't want to be found. I arrived at 07:45. Not early enough to seem eager. Not late enough to seem careless. Precisely on time because that's what people notice when everything else is unknown. The lobby was empty except for one security desk. No receptionist. No plants. No music. Just clean white walls and a man behind the desk who didn't look up when I walked in. "Juliet Caldwell," I said. He tapped something on a screen. A badge printed silently from a machine I couldn't see. He slid it across the counter without making eye contact. "Third floor, room 312. You'll be expected." The elevator required the badge to function. No buttons inside. It just moved. Smooth. Silent. Like the building itself was deciding where I belonged. The doors opened on the third floor. One hallway. One door. Room 312. I knocked once. It opened from the inside. The woman from the phone stood in front of me. Mid-50s. Silver-streaked hair pulled back tightly. No jewelry. No makeup that I could see. Her suit was dark navy, perfectly fitted with a small pin on her lapel that I recognized immediately. A shield with a star. Department of Justice. National Security Division. "Come in," she said, not warm, not cold, efficient. The room was small. A table. 4 chairs. A monitor on the wall. 2 water bottles. That's it. No decoration. No personality. A room designed for conversations that don't leave the room. She sat across from me. Another woman entered behind me. Younger, late 20s. Laptop already open. She sat in the corner without speaking. Support. Technical, silent. "My name is Diana Voss," the first woman said. "I'm a senior counsel with the National Security Division. What I'm about to tell you is classified. If you repeat any part of this conversation outside this room, you will be prosecuted under federal law. Do you understand?" "I understand." She nodded. "Good. Then let's talk about what Marcus Caldwell is actually selling." She tapped the table. The monitor on the wall lit up. Data, charts, documents, all marked with header stamps I couldn't fully read but recognized the format of. Federal investigation files. 18 months ago, Diana began, our office flagged an unusual pattern in foreign investment targeting U.S. consulting firms with defense-adjacent contracts. The pattern suggested a coordinated effort to acquire intellectual property through corporate acquisitions rather than espionage. She clicked. A new image appeared. A company logo, European, clean, professional. I'd never seen it before. "This is Meridian Global Partners, based in Zurich. On paper, they're a management consulting firm. In reality, they're a procurement vehicle for a state-sponsored intelligence program. They don't buy companies to run them. They buy companies to extract technology." She clicked again. A list of acquisitions appeared. 12 companies over 5 years, all consulting firms, all with defense contracts, all dissolved within 18 months of purchase. The technology disappeared into shell structures that went dark. "Meridian has made an offer for Caldwell Strategic Group," Diana said. $320 million, well above market value. The deal is being brokered through a firm in London that specializes in transactions designed to avoid CFIUS review. CFIUS, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, the government body that reviews foreign acquisitions of American companies for national security risks. If you can avoid their review, you can sell anything to anyone. Marcus doesn't know, Diana said, reading my expression before I could hide it. Or if he does, he doesn't care. The offer is too high, too clean, too fast. He sees a payout. He doesn't see what he's handing over. She looked at me directly. But you see it, because you built what they're buying. I didn't confirm or deny. Not yet. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because we can't block the sale through normal channels, Diana said. The transaction structure is designed to bypass regulatory review. By the time we build a case, the deal closes and the technology is gone. She paused. But there's another path. If the intellectual property at the center of the deal has a contested ownership claim, the sale can't proceed. Not legally. Not cleanly. Any buyer, even a foreign one, won't touch assets with active litigation attached. It creates too much risk. You want me to claim ownership, I said. I want you to establish ownership, she corrected. There's a difference. Claiming is saying something, establishing is proving it, and based on what we've seen, you can prove it. She clicked again, the screen filled with code. My code. Specific architecture I recognized immediately. The predictive modeling framework. The one I built when I was 17. The one that won Caldwell Strategic its first major contract after the overhaul. This was filed with the Patent Office under Caldwell Strategic's corporate registration, Diana said. But the original development logs, the source code repositories, the version history, all of that exists independently of the company's systems, doesn't it? I looked at the screen, then at her. Yes, I said. Where? She asked. Somewhere your people can't find, and Marcus's people don't know exists. A small shift in her expression, not surprise, confirmation. That's what we thought, she said. Which means you have something no one else in this situation has. Leverage, real leverage. Not the kind that depends on someone's opinion. The kind that depends on documented, time-stamped, verifiable proof. She leaned back slightly. Here's what I'm offering. Full federal protection for your claim, legal representation from our office, and a guarantee that when this is over, the intellectual property you created will be recognized as yours. Not the firm's, not the family's, yours. And in return, I asked. In return, you give us access to everything. Full documentation, full history, full transparency. We need to understand exactly what Meridian would be getting if this sale goes through. Not estimates, not summaries, the actual architecture. I sat with that for a moment, not because I was unsure, because I was calculating. If I do this, I said slowly, Caldwell Strategic loses its most valuable asset. The firm's valuation collapses. Marcus loses everything. Diana didn't flinch. That's not my concern, she said. My concern is preventing U.S. technology from being transferred to a hostile intelligence apparatus. If your brother's business deal collapses in the process, that's a side effect, not an objective. Honest, cold, clear, I appreciated that. There's something else you should know, Diana added. Marcus isn't acting alone on this deal. He has a partner inside the firm. Someone who's been facilitating the acquisition from the beginning. Someone with enough access to prepare the due diligence materials that Meridian requires. She clicked one more time. A name appeared on the screen. Elena Caldwell. My brother's wife. The woman who sat beside him at the will reading. The woman who called me about my medical coverage with practiced concern in her voice. The woman who was already planning her $15 million exit while helping sell technology she didn't build to people she didn't understand. I wasn't surprised. Disappointed isn't the right word either. It's more like the feeling you get when a puzzle piece clicks into a space you suspected it would fit, but hoped it wouldn't. How long? I asked. At least 9 months, Diana said. She's been communicating with Meridian's broker through encrypted channels. We intercepted the traffic 6 months ago. She's the one who structured the deal to avoid regulatory review. She's the one who prepared the sanitized version of the firm's technology portfolio for Meridian's assessment. And she's the one who's been pushing Marcus to accept the offer before anyone inside the firm realizes what's actually being sold. I looked at the screen, at Alina's name, at the communication logs beside it, timestamps, frequencies, patterns, all the evidence of a betrayal that had been running in parallel with my family's entire performance of grief. "When does the deal close?" I asked. 53 days from now, Diana said, "if nothing disrupts it." I stood up, not dramatically, just enough to signal the conversation was moving. "I need 48 hours, I said. "For what?" "To prepare what you need, and to decide how this ends." Diana studied me for a moment, then she nodded. "You have 48 hours. After that, we proceed with or without you, and I should be clear, without you we can slow this down, but we can't stop it. You're the only one who can." I walked out of room 312 without saying goodbye, not because I was being rude, because I'd already started building the next sequence in my head, and building requires silence. I spent the next 36 hours doing something I hadn't done in 6 years. I connected the hard drive to the outside world. Not directly, not carelessly. Through a relay chain I'd built years ago, 3 proxy servers, 2 encrypted tunnels, and a virtual machine that existed only in RAM. If anyone tried to trace the connection, they'd find nothing. Because by the time they got to the end of the chain, the beginning wouldn't exist anymore. The files loaded, 6 years of work, organized in a way only I understood, not by project name or date, by function, what each system did, how it connected, where the weak points were, where the value lived. I started with the core architecture, the predictive analytics platform. This was the foundation, the thing Caldwell Strategic built everything else on top of. Client assessments, risk models, market forecasts, contract valuations, all of it ran through this system. I designed it in 3 layers. The surface layer was what clients saw, clean interfaces, clear outputs, professional presentations. The middle layer was what the firm's analysts used, data inputs, model adjustments, scenario testing. The third layer was mine, the engine, the actual logic that turned raw data into actionable intelligence. No one at Caldwell Strategic had ever seen the third layer. Not my father, not Marcus, not Alina, because I didn't put it on their servers. I put it on mine. That's the trick most people miss. When you build something for someone else, you can build it so they own the output, but you own the engine. They see the results. They sell the results. They profit from the results. But the thing that generates those results, that stays with you, unseen, untouchable, until the moment you decide it matters. I extracted the complete development history, every version, every revision, every timestamp. 6 years of documentation that proved, conclusively, that the core intellectual property of Caldwell Strategic was designed, built, and maintained by one person, me. Then I went deeper. The financial structures, the ones that protected the firm's assets from liability, optimized tax positions, and created the appearance of complexity that kept regulators at bay. I designed those too, every shell company, every transfer route, every legal structure that made the money move the way it needed to move, all documented, all time-stamped, all mine. The risk assessment frameworks, the ones that predicted market shifts, identified contract vulnerabilities, and gave Caldwell Strategic its reputation for seeing around corners. I built those, tested them, refined them over years until they were accurate enough to make the firm look like it had institutional vision instead of one person working in silence. By the time I finished extracting everything, the files filled 3 encrypted drives, development logs, source code, architecture diagrams, financial models, communication records between me and the firm's systems, internal access patterns that showed exactly who used what and when, the complete history of an invisible empire that my family had been living on top of without knowing it was there. The last thing I did was the most important. I created a legal containment file, Not for court, for leverage. A single document that summarized everything in plain language. What I built, when I built it, how it was used, who profited from it, and what would happen if I removed my authorization for its continued use. Because here's the thing about systems you build. If you design them with a kill switch, you don't need to ask permission to use it. You just need to decide when. At hour 37, I packaged everything and sent it through a secure channel to the address Diana had provided. No message, no explanation, just the files. If her people were as good as she claimed, they'd understand what they were looking at within hours. At hour 46, my phone rang. Same unknown number. "We've reviewed the materials," Diana said. "This is more comprehensive than we expected." "Is it enough?" I asked. "It's enough to freeze the sale. It's enough to establish independent ownership of the core IP. And it's enough to build a federal case against Juliet Caldwell for facilitating an unauthorized technology transfer." And Marcus? Marcus is harder. He can argue he didn't know. Ignorance isn't a defense for everything, but in this context, it creates reasonable doubt. We can pressure him. We can't guarantee prosecution. That was fine. I didn't need Marcus in prison. I needed Marcus without the thing that made him powerful. And once the IP was separated from the firm, Caldwell Strategic wasn't worth $300 million. It wasn't worth 30. "One condition," I said. "Name it." "When this goes public, I don't speak. I don't do interviews. I don't explain. The documents speak for themselves. I'm not a story. I'm a filing." Silence on the line. Then Diana exhaled slightly, not frustration, something closer to respect. "That might be the most intelligent thing anyone has said to me in this investigation," she said. "Done." The line went dead. I sat in the apartment for another hour, not thinking, not planning, just waiting for the feeling to arrive. The one people expect after a decision like this. Relief, satisfaction, vindication, something. It didn't come because this wasn't about feeling. This was about correction, and correction doesn't have an emotion attached to it. It just has a result. Day 49, 4 days before the deal was scheduled to close. Marcus called me for the first time since the will reading, not to check on me, to check on something else. "Juliet," he said, his voice carrying that particular tone people use when they need something. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me." "Okay." The firm's systems, the analytics platform, it's been acting strange. Models are running slower. Some outputs are coming back different. Did you do something before you left? I almost smiled, not because it was funny, because the system wasn't acting strange. It was degrading. By design. 3 days ago, I had remotely initiated a controlled decay sequence on the surface layer. Not a crash, nothing dramatic. Just a slow, steady reduction in performance that would make the system look unreliable without revealing why. Any technical team would see degradation. No technical team would find a cause, because the cause wasn't in the system. It was in the authorization layer. And the authorization layer only responded to me. "No," I said, "I didn't do anything." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Then what's happening? Our tech team can't figure it out. They're saying the core architecture might be failing." Might be failing. The system wasn't failing. It was withdrawing. There's a difference. Failing is accidental. Withdrawing is intentional. And intentional means someone is in control. "I'm sure it's nothing," I said. "Systems have hiccups." "This isn't a hiccup," Marcus snapped. The polished tone cracked, just slightly. "Meridian's due diligence team is running final assessments this week. If the platform shows instability, they could pull back. This deal is worth $320 million, Juliet." He said my name like it was a warning. Like I should understand the weight of what he was telling me and adjust my behavior accordingly. That's the thing about people who have never built anything. They think other people's work should just keep working. Forever, without maintenance. Without the person who built it, like a machine that runs itself. "I understand," I said. "I just don't know what you want me to do about it." He paused. I could hear him breathing, faster than normal. The deal was slipping and he didn't know why or how to stop it. Can you at least look at it? He asked. Just remotely, just to see if there's something obvious. I don't have access anymore, I said, which was technically true. I didn't have access through the firm's systems. I had access through mine. But he didn't need to know that. You're the only one who understands that architecture, he said. His voice shifted. Lower, almost pleading. Please, Juliet, this isn't just about money. This is about the family's future. The family's future. The phrase that was only ever used when someone wanted me to sacrifice something for people who had never sacrificed anything for me. I can't help you, Marcus, I said, simple, flat, final. He didn't respond for a long time. Then, quieter than I'd ever heard him. We'll see about that. The line went dead. That was line number 14. He knew I could help. He just didn't want to admit that he needed me. Day 51, 2 days before close. I was sitting in the apartment when the email arrived. Not to my personal account. To a dormant address I'd set up years ago for one specific purpose. Receiving communications from a system I'd built to monitor Caldwell Strategic's internal network. The email contained one file, a communication log, intercepted automatically, between Alina Caldwell and a number registered in London, the broker. The message was short. Platform degradation accelerating. Buyer requesting independent technical assessment before final sign-off. Need confirmation that architecture is stable. If not, deal adjusts downward by minimum 40%. Advise. Alina's response came 17 minutes later. Architecture is stable. Issue is personnel. Former employee had access. Recommend exclusion from assessment. Will handle internally. Former employee. That's what I was now. Not a daughter, not a sister, not the person who built the thing they were selling. A former employee. I read the message twice. Then I forwarded it to Diana's secure channel. No commentary needed. The evidence spoke for itself. Day 52, 1 day before close. Marcus called again. This time no pretense, no polished tone, just urgency wrapped in anger. What did you do? He asked before I even said hello. I didn't do anything, I said. The system is failing, not degrading. Failing. Models are returning errors. Client data is corrupting. Meridian's technical team found anomalies in the core code they can't explain. They're demanding a meeting with whoever built the platform. Built, past tense, like the person who created it was already gone. I can't help with that, I said. Stop saying that, Marcus shouted. The first time I'd ever heard him raise his voice at me, not because he was angry, because he was scared. You built that system. You know every line of code. You know how it works. And right now, you're the only person on Earth who can fix whatever's happening to it. He was right about one thing. I was the only person who could fix it. That was exactly the point. Marcus, I said calmly, do you remember what Dad said when I showed him the first model? The one that won the defense contract? Silence. He said, this is good. We'll present it as internal development. He didn't say thank you. He didn't put my name on it. He just took it and used it and told everyone it came from the firm. What does that have to do with right now? Marcus demanded. Everything, I said. Because the system that's failing right now isn't the firm's system. It's my system. The firm just had permission to use it, and that permission has conditions. More silence, longer this time. What conditions? He asked. His voice was quieter now, the anger replaced by something else. Fear. That it's not sold to a third party without my authorization, I said, and I haven't authorized anything. The line went so quiet I could hear him breathing. Short, shallow, the breathing of someone watching something fall apart and not knowing how to stop it. Juliet, he said, please, you don't understand what happens if this deal falls apart. I've leveraged everything. The properties, the accounts, Alina's trust, everything is tied to this sale. If it doesn't close, I lose all of it. Everything, the word hung there. The same everything that was supposed to be $470 million. The same everything that left me with $2 million and a trustee. He'd taken everything from me. And now he was asking me to save everything for him. I know, I said. That's why I'm not helping. You're doing this on purpose, he said. Not a question, a realization. No, I said. I'm doing this because I have to. Not for me. For the people who would be affected if that technology ends up where it's going. What are you talking about? I can't explain that to you, Marcus. Not yet. But soon, everyone will understand. And when they do, I need you to remember one thing. What? I asked you to stop, twice. You didn't listen, that's not on me. I ended the call, turned off the phone, sat in the silence of the apartment and listened to the hum of the hard drive on the floor beside me. Still running, still holding everything. Still the only thing in the world that could save Caldwell Strategic or destroy it, depending on which way I decided to let it fall. Day 53, the day the deal was supposed to close. I was at a coffee shop in Old Town Alexandria when it happened. Not hiding, just existing somewhere normal while everything abnormal unfolded somewhere else. My phone buzzed. Diana. It's done, she said. No preamble, no build-up, just results. Tell me. At 6:15 this morning, federal agents served simultaneous warrants on Caldwell Strategic Group headquarters, Marcus Caldwell's personal residence, and Alina Caldwell's separate residence. 3 locations, coordinated, no advance warning. Marcus, in custody, along with Alina. They're being held at a federal facility pending initial charges. Alina is facing charges related to facilitating unauthorized technology transfer to a foreign entity. Marcus is facing charges related to fraud, misrepresentation of intellectual property ownership, and conspiracy to defraud the United States government. I took a sip of coffee, not because I needed to, because the moment needed to feel normal, and coffee is the most normal thing I know. The sale, I asked. Dead. Meridian pulled out the moment the warrants became public. Their broker in London has also been detained for questioning. The entire transaction structure is now under federal review. And the firm. Caldwell Strategic Group is under federal receivership. All assets frozen. All operations suspended. The court will appoint an independent manager to assess what, if anything, has value without the core intellectual property. Without the core intellectual property, which was mine, which I had documented, which I now had federal recognition of as independently owned, which meant Caldwell Strategic, without my systems, without my models, without my architecture, was essentially a brand name attached to an empty office. What happens to the employees? I asked, because not everyone there was part of this. Some of them just worked there. The independent manager will assess operational continuity. Some functions may continue under restructured ownership. Others will be dissolved. It's not ideal, but it's the least damaging option available. I nodded to no one, and my claim. Filed this morning. Independent ownership of all core intellectual property. The documentation you provided is comprehensive enough that we don't anticipate significant dispute. The Patent Office has been notified. The original filings are being amended to reflect you as the sole author and owner. That was it. 6 years of invisible work. 6 years of building something no one saw. And now, legally, officially, undeniably, it was mine. Not the firm's, not the family's. Mine. Juliet, Diana said, her tone shifting slightly. Softer. Not much, just enough to notice. I've been doing this work for 22 years. I've seen a lot of people in difficult situations make a lot of different choices. Most of them react. They fight, they scream, they negotiate, they compromise. You didn't do any of that. I couldn't, I said. Reacting would have put me in their system. I needed to stay out of it until I could change it from the outside. That's exactly right, she said. And that's why this worked. Not because you were smarter than them, because you were more patient. I didn't respond to that, not because I disagreed. Because patience isn't something you brag about. It's something you survive with. There's one more thing, Diana added. Marcus requested to speak with you through his lawyer. He's been asking since this morning. Does he know the full picture? I asked. He knows enough to know that you're the reason the deal collapsed. He doesn't know the national security angle. That's still classified. As far as he's concerned, this is a family dispute that got out of control. Family dispute. That's what it would look like from the inside. A sister who sabotaged her brother's business deal out of spite. That's the story he'd tell himself because the alternative, that he never actually controlled anything, was too devastating to accept. "I'll pass," I said. "Understood. We'll proceed without the conversation." The line went dead. I finished my coffee, left a tip, walked back to the apartment through streets that looked exactly the same as they did yesterday, even though everything behind them had changed. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in a federal building in downtown Washington, not as a suspect, not as a witness, as the owner of intellectual property that the United States government was now very interested in protecting. The room was different from Diana's building in Arlington. Larger, more official. A conference table that could seat 12. Windows that actually showed the outside world. And one person sitting across from me who I'd never met but recognized immediately from photographs. Director Catherine Holt, National Security Agency, not the public-facing leadership, the operational side, the side that deals with threats before they become news. "Ms. Caldwell," she said, extending her hand. Firm grip, direct eye contact. The kind of handshake that says, "I don't have time for small talk." "Director." "Please sit. We have a lot to cover." I sat. She placed a folder on the table, thinner than I expected. "Your intellectual property portfolio," she said. "We've completed a full technical assessment. I'll be direct. What you built is significant, not just commercially, strategically." She opened the folder. 1 page, a summary, but I didn't need to read it. I built what was on that page. I knew what it could do. "The predictive analytics platform alone," she continued, "has applications in signals intelligence, threat assessment, and infrastructure protection that we've been trying to develop internally for 4 years. You solved problems our teams haven't been able to solve. And you did it alone, without clearance, without resources, without anyone knowing." She looked at me with an expression I couldn't fully categorize. Not admiration exactly, something closer to recognition. The look someone gives you when they realize you've been operating at a level they didn't know existed. "Here's what I'm going to offer," she said. "Not because I have to, because I want to. Your technology under your ownership, under your control, integrated into national security infrastructure with full compensation, full credit, and full authority over how it's used. Not a contract, not a sale, a partnership. You maintain ownership. We provide the operational environment. Together, we build something that actually matters." She paused. "You've spent 6 years building systems for people who took credit for your work and sold you out when it suited them. I'm offering you the chance to build systems for people who will know exactly who you are and what you're worth. The question is whether you're interested." I looked at the folder, at the summary, at the scope of what she was describing. This wasn't a job. It was a position. The kind of position that doesn't come with a title because titles are too small for what it actually is. "I have conditions," I said. "Name them." "First, my name stays attached to everything I build. Not the agency's name, not a classification marker. My name, in every internal record, in every development log, in every summary that goes to leadership. If my work is good enough to use, it's good enough to credit." Director Holt nodded. "Agreed." "Second, I operate independently. No micromanagement, no oversight committees. I report results, not process. If you need to control how I work, you don't need my work." A pause, longer this time. Then she nodded again. "Agreed, with standard security protocols. You know why those exist." "I do." "Third, I choose my own team. Not assigned, not recommended. Selected, I work with people I trust, not people someone else trusts for me." "Agreed, within clearance parameters." "Fourth," I said, "no public profile, no interviews, no recognition outside the operational chain. I don't need the world to know what I do. I need the people who matter to know. That's it." Director Holt closed the folder. She looked at me for a long moment, not evaluating anymore, deciding. Those are unusual conditions, she said. They're non-negotiable conditions, I replied. She smiled, just slightly, just enough. That's what I expected you to say. She stood, extended her hand again. I took it. Welcome to the building, Miss Caldwell. Your office will be ready Monday. I never spoke to Marcus again, not because I forbade it, because there was nothing left to say. Alina was convicted 18 months later. Federal charges, foreign technology transfer, conspiracy. The sentence was 7 years. Marcus was convicted on lesser charges. Fraud, misrepresentation. He got 3 years. The Georgetown house was sold. The Aspen property was seized. The Hamptons estate was liquidated. Everything my father built, everything Marcus inherited, everything Alina helped dismantle, it all went to the same place. Nowhere. The $2 million my father left me in the will, I never touched it. The trust still exists. The monthly disbursements still arrive in a bank account I don't check. Not because I'm making a statement, because the amount is so small compared to what I actually own now that it feels like a rounding error from someone who didn't understand math. People ask me sometimes if I feel vindicated, if watching my family fall was satisfying. The honest answer is no. Vindication requires emotional investment in the outcome, and I stopped being emotionally invested in them a long time ago. What I felt wasn't satisfaction. It was clarity. The clarity that comes when you finally see the full picture and realize you were never the problem. You were the solution. And the people who treated you like a problem were the ones who needed solving. That's the thing about being underestimated your entire life. It teaches you something that confidence and visibility never can. It teaches you to watch, to listen, to understand dynamics before you participate in them, to know where the power actually lives before anyone else sees it. Most people think power is about position, about titles, about being the person in front of the room, but the person in front of the room is visible, and visible people are predictable. They operate in patterns that anyone can study, copy, or disrupt. The real power is in the systems, the architecture, the invisible structures that make everything else possible, and the people who build those structures don't need to be seen. They need to be necessary. That's the lesson. Not that you should hide, not that you should be passive, but that you should build something that can't be ignored when it matters. And until it matters, you should let everyone underestimate you, because underestimation is the best camouflage there is. No one defends against what they don't see coming. My father saw a sick daughter who needed managing. Marcus saw a burden who needed containing. Alina saw an obstacle who needed removing. None of them saw what was actually there. A person who had been building the ground they stood on for 6 years without them knowing it. And when I pulled that ground away, they didn't fall because I pushed them. They fell because they never learned how to stand on their own. That's not revenge, that's architecture. And architecture, when it's built correctly, doesn't need to explain itself. It just holds, or it doesn't, depending on who designed it. I walk into a building in Washington every Monday morning. No uniform, no rank, no medals, just a badge and a code that opens doors most people don't know exist. I sit in a room with no windows and build systems that protect people who will never know my name. And that's exactly how I want it. Because the strongest position you can hold isn't the one everyone sees. It's the one no one can replace. This story is a work of fiction, but the patterns it describes are real. Underestimation, betrayal, silent building, strategic patience. These aren't just story elements. They're survival strategies that people use every day in families, workplaces, and systems that are designed to make them feel small. If you're in that position right now, the one where everyone thinks you're less than you are, remember this. You don't need to prove them wrong. You need to build something that proves itself, quietly, consistently, without permission. Because the moment will come when the system breaks, and everyone looks around asking the same question. Who can fix this? And when the answer is you, nothing else matters.